Hello everyone and welcome back to part 2 of this series. In the last part, we've created the Tilemap node and we saw how to use the auto tie and the random tie features. In this part, we are going to continue by setting up the 2D navigation system, and we are going to create a player and enemies and making them following the player wherever he goes, while avoiding obstacles, which will be those boxes here. Alright then, I'm going to start by creating the player node by going to add a new scene. The player node is going to be the character body 2D node. Let me rename it to player and add sprite 2D and the collision shape 2D node for it. Now for the sprite, you can use the icon here by selecting the sprite and click and drag this icon to the texture. And for the collision shape, I'm going to create a circular shape and expand it like this. And I want to scale down the player size. So we go to player and go to transform. And for the scale, I'm going to make it to 0.4. Now we need to save it. And I'm going to add a script for this player. Let me select empty. And I've added this code that will make us control the player by pressing the arrow keys. And here I've created 3 variables: the acceleration, the max speed, and the friction. And I've created the move function, and inside of it we have the input vector variable initialized to 0. And for the x value of the input vector, we have input.getActionStrength UI right minus input.getActionStrength UI left. And that means if you press the right button, we will have a value of 1. And if you press the left button, we will have the value of -1. And if you press the left and the right buttons at the same time, we will have the value of 0. And I did the same thing for the y value. And here I normalized the input vector value. Now, if the input vector value is different than 0, then the velocity will move toward the input vector times max speed with the acceleration times delta. And if it have the value of 0, the player will stop moving. And why I did this? Because I wanted to make the player movement a little bit smooth. Now we call the move and slide function, and inside the physics process, we call the move function. Now, let me create an instance of the player node inside the main scene. And let us run the game. We need to select the main scene. Now we have control of the player by pressing the arrow keys. But as you can see, the player can move through those boxes, which are supposed to be obstacles and represent walls. And why is that? Because we didn't add a collision shape for those boxes. And to do that, we need to go to the Tilemap node. And here in tile set, we need to select this box. And in the inspector, we need to go to physics layers and add element. I want to set the layer of this physics layer to 2. And in here, we need to go to physics, click on physics layer 0. And now we can create points around this box, which will represent the collision shape of this box. Now we need to save it. Let me move the player here to the map. And now when we run the game again and try to get close to those boxes, oh, it's gone through them again. And that's because we need to set the layers of the player. So in the player node, we need to go to collision. I want to set the layer of the player to the number 3, and I wanted to collide with the layer number 2 and the layer number 3, which will represent the players and the enemies at the same time. Now let me test it again. Now as you can see, we can't go through those boxes any longer and everything works fine. Now the next thing to do, we want to create the enemy node, and it's going to be a character body 2D also, and it will have a sprite 2D, a collision shape, and we want to add a navigation agent 2D, and also I'm going to add a timer. So the navigation agent 2D is the node which will help the enemy find a specific path to a certain position while avoiding obstacles. And this timer here, I want to change the value to 0.1 seconds and check auto start. So every 0.1 second, we want the player to update its path to the target, which is going to be the player. Now I want to rename this node to enemy and save it. Now for the sprite, we can use the icon here, click and drag to texture. And for the collision shape, it's going to be a circle, collision shape 2D. Want to scale it like this. And I just want to change the color of the sprite by going to visibility and modulate. And here I want to make it have the red color. And I want to scale down the size of the enemy by going to transform, scale to 0.4. And let's add a script for this node. And I've added this code that contain a variable which is the max speed of the enemy, the target which is a node 2D, and it's going to be the player. And we will assign this in the inspector later, and I've created a navigation agent variable. Now in the physics process function, I've created a direction variable which will have to local navigation agent.get next path position.normalized, and we assign a variable of direction times max speed to the velocity, and we call the move and slide function. And I've created a function called create path, and inside of it we have the navigation agent dot target position equal to target dot global position, and in the timer we want to call the create path every 0.1 second to update the path of the enemy. Now we need to go to the timer and click on node next to the inspector here, and we need to connect this timeout signal to the enemy node. Now selecting the enemy node, we need to change the collision, so we need to set the enemy layer to number 3 and the mask to number 1, 2, and 3. Now let me create an instance of the enemy inside the main scene. I want to put it here. And as you can see, now we have the target in the inspector, and we need to click on assign and select the player. So the target is going to be the player. And now we can run the game, but nothing is happening. The enemy is not following the player yet, and that's because there is no navigation area where the enemy can navigate in. So we need to go back to the Tilemap node here and set navigation area to the tiles where the enemy can navigate in. So go to tile set and select all those tiles. Like this. And in the inspector, we need to go to navigation layers, click on add element, and the layer is going to be number 1. And in here, we need to go to navigation, select navigation layer 0. And here we need to create a point around this tile. So as you can see, all those tiles now have this navigation area. We need to save it. And now we can run the game again. And as you can see now, the enemy is following the player. So one more thing we can add here is by going to the enemy node and selecting the navigation agent 2D and going to debug, we can click on enable it here, so we can see a line that represents the path of the enemy. And also we can add more than one enemy. So I'm going to create another enemy here. And let me put it here. And we need to assign a target for it. And now I can run the game again. And I see that both of those enemies are following the player. And we can see that we have a lion that represents the path of those enemies. But you can see that the enemy can stuck behind these boxes sometimes. And to fix that, we can go back to the enemy node. Under Pathfinding, can go to Path Post-Processing and change it to Edge Centered. So now the enemy can no longer get close to those boxes and it will not stuck anymore. Now the game is more smoother and everything works fine. I hope I really helped you with this and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and see you all later.